It is easy to look at the global economy today and see China as a sudden arrival, a massive manufacturing engine that seemingly appeared in a single generation to control the world's supply chains. The physical evidence of this growth is everywhere. We see vast megacities standing where farmland existed just decades ago, sophisticated advancements in artificial intelligence, and deep economic influence stretching across continents. This creates a specific narrative in the West. We tend to view China as a developing nation that simply got rich quick. But that perspective misreads how Beijing actually operates. This chart tracks global GDP share over the last 3,000 years. For the majority of recorded history, long before modern Europe took shape, China was the wealthiest, most technologically advanced civilization on Earth. The sharp drop in the 19th century is the anomaly. The geopolitical tension we see today is the calculated, methodical recovery of an ancient empire returning to its historical baseline. To understand that baseline, you have to look at the ancient state capacity of the Chinese empire. While other parts of the world remained fragmented, China operated as a centralized bureaucracy, capable of organizing millions of people to execute massive, multi-generational infrastructure projects. Dynasties like the Han and the Tang used this organization to build massive wealth. They expanded intercontinental trade routes across Asia to the Middle East, exporting goods like silk, porcelain, and tea to extract capital from the rest of the world. But holding a centralized empire together for thousands of years requires a specific political philosophy. For the Chinese dynasties, survival relied on a concept known as the mandate of heaven. This cyclical flowchart represents that ancient operating system. The rule is strictly conditional. Heaven grants a ruler the right to govern only if they provide stability and prosperity. If leadership weakens, if corruption takes root, or if society falls into chaos, the mandate is revoked. When the mandate is lost, the transition is total. The system demands that a new authority step in, end the chaos, and impose order. In this political culture, stability is synonymous with survival. This operating system maintained China's status as a preeminent global power for centuries. Until it encountered a crisis the cycle was not built to handle. By the 1800s, Europe had aggressively industrialized. They possessed advanced naval militaries and rapidly expanding economies that required new markets to exploit. They looked towards a Qing dynasty that had grown stagnant. When Chinese authorities attempted to stop British traders from flooding their cities with opium, foreign powers answered with artillery. China lost the ensuing Opium Wars, forcing the empire to sign unequal treaties that carved up its sovereign territory and handed control of its ports to outsiders. The empire fractured into competing warlord states, creating a vulnerability that led to the disintegration of the state and the invasion by Imperial Japan in the 1930s. Entire cities were leveled, and millions of civilians were killed. This century-long collapse left a profound psychological scar on the nation. Today, it is explicitly taught and remembered in China as the century of humiliation. When Mao Zedong and the Communist Party finally won the internal civil war in 1949, it was a desperate attempt to reunify a shattered nation, expel foreign occupiers, and reclaim the lost mandate of heaven. But political control did not translate to economic recovery. Mao implemented radical internal policies aimed at forced industrialization. Campaigns like the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution severely mismanaged resources, punished intellectuals, and triggered famines that killed millions. By the 1970s, China had regained its sovereignty, but crippled its own economy, leaving it as vulnerable as it had been a century prior. To pull the state back from the brink of collapse, a new leader, Deng Xiaoping, emerged with a pragmatic strategy to modernize the nation. Deng embraced a severe contradiction. The state would maintain the rigid political control of the Communist Party, but it would completely open its economy to foreign capital and free markets. Special economic zones were designated. Western corporations, eager for cheap labor, poured investment into the country. Almost overnight, factories multiplied, and China positioned itself as the central node for global manufacturing. The catalyst occurred in 2001 when China was admitted into the World Trade Organization. Western markets opened to Chinese exports, shifting the global balance of trade. Looking at this area graph, the mathematical scale of the pivot becomes clear. Extreme poverty rates plummeted, hundreds of millions of citizens entered the middle class, and export revenue exploded upward. It remains the fastest sustained industrialization event in human history. By hybridizing a communist political structure with a capitalist economic engine, the state achieved its goal. It generated the capital required to fortify its borders, secure its territory, and successfully recapture the mandate. Today, Beijing uses that wealth to project power outward. Through strategies like the Belt and Road Initiative, China is funding and building ports, rail networks, and highways across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. That same economic dominance directly finances a modernizing military, advanced space programs, and a push to control the future of artificial intelligence, putting it in direct competition with the United States. When we see trade wars and rising military tensions in the Pacific, we are watching a nation operating on deep historical memory. The state's primary directive is to ensure that the century of humiliation can never be repeated. The actions taken in Beijing are not dictated by 4-year election cycles. They are the result of long-term strategy designed to secure permanent stability. History shows that nations can collapse and empires can shatter, but if they retain their institutional memory, they can methodically rebuild. China has simply completed its cycle, and how the rest of the world adapts to its return will define the 21st century.